But number
You
two
ready
or 12.
for 12? Yes. This sums up the entire American right wing, and then the opposite of this fallacy is the American left wing. But go ahead.
Oh, love that. The appeal to tradition, also conservative bias back in those times, quote, the good old days. The ancient fallacy that a standpoint, situation, or action is right, proper, and correct simply because it has always, and always is quote, so quote, always, end quote, been that way. Because people have, quote, always, end quote, thought that way, or because it was that way long ago, most often meaning in the audience member's youth or childhood, not before, and still continues to serve one particular group very well. A correct argument from ethos, that of past generations, specifically in ethos. So, ethos we talked about was like social social utility, and this is specifically within social utility, talking about past generations. Example, quote, in America, women have always been paid less, so let's not mess with long-standing tradition, end quote. Also, arguments from inertia and default bias. The opposite of this fallacy is the appeal to novelty. Also, pro innovation bias or recency bias, and the bad old days or the early adopters fallacy. Example, it's new and therefore it must be improved. Or that never happens, like with Apple products as an example. This is the very latest discovery, therefore it has to be better. Ooh.
All right.
Yeah.
This is a fun
Huge.
one. So appeal to tradition. Yeah, we'll do appeal to tradition, and then appeal to novelty is the opposite.
Yep. Go the tradition. I feel like these two. Yeah, I'm loving the ones that we're going through today. Um,
Appeal to tradition is the entire conservative right wing
yeah,
of America. That's,
yeah,
that's their whole running thing. It's the whole thing.
yeah. It's like these two. I think out of all, I mean, this is interesting. This is for me. This is bringing up actually a lot of sadness and a little bit of frustration.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's like I feel like these two in particular are incredibly strong, like really, really strong. Um, to the point that like I would even argue that these two are strong to the point of blinding.
Oh yeah.
And to me, it's like because one, and I want to be clear, like I right now in terms of my sentence structure, I'm speaking from a superior or authoritative lens, and so it's going to sound like what I'm saying is that I am immune to these, and therefore everybody else is, and it's not the case. Very much so, I have fallen for these as well. I think for me, what is like what's frustrating is how I like how you talked about early on in this series about how any politician can say something that's super fallacious, but because the amount of language necessary to recover from that or explain it away is going to take so much more time and more resource, so it's
They get away
it's
with it.
difficult to right. This to me, like these two, I feel like out of all the fallacies we covered so far, I, it's like they have the most amount of impact for the least amount of words, and it's like so far, and it's that to me, I think is like it's so much so. By the way, that Tony Robbins, who you and I referenced a lot in this series, but also like we both consider him to be a pretty, uh, mm, a pretty, he's a very effective communicator. Um, for good, one would argue, or for social utility.
Sure.
He uses um, consistently. He actually leans on the appeal to novelty in his events. So an example is there's a practice that he has dubbed priming, and in this practice, there's a very specific progression of how he does priming. I've listened to the recording of priming hundreds of times. I've attended 14 Tony Robbins events where he's introduced priming consistently throughout those events. And so anyway, there's a
Can you define that priming? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the idea falls upon rather it falls upon the idea that um a mind can be primed or conditioned preemptively to once primed or conditioned in a strong enough way, it can maintain that conditioning throughout the remainder of a day or throughout the remainder of a lifetime if it's strong enough. And so a similar word or a synonym to priming in this context would be conditioning. Um, and so it's like, yeah, essentially when he calls it, he has called this process priming um, that he teaches people, but essentially it's conditioning the mind to be a certain way. And in Tony Robbins' priming exercise, it's the intention is to prime or to condition the mind to orient more towards gratitude and progress. That's essentially what he's doing with the process. And Tony Robbins' priming process is very particular. It goes in a very particular order. It has very particular steps. There was a Unleash the Power Within that I attended with him, with 15,000 other people, where he typically will introduce priming on the third day or at the end of the first. And for whatever reason, in this particular event, he decided to introduce priming on the first day. But I noticed that when he did it, he omitted certain pieces of it, and he also did not call it priming. So he was introducing priming or Tony Robbins' process of priming without announcing it, and he used the process anyway, but he omitted certain sections and kept others. The next day, or the next time he came on stage on day 3, he did the official practice of priming, officially announced it, officially got people ready for it. But he omitted the parts that he used from the first time because he needed to continue to use the appeal to novelty, understanding that in an event space, we are wanting to help people retain as much information as possible. The appeal, people's need for something to be new is so strong that he has found out that if you repeat the same information twice, even if you repeat the same word twice in a paragraph of speaking, it begins to pull people's attention away. So to me, it's like, or people start to lose attention. And to me, the part that is like equally part fascinating about these two, as well as a bit saddening, is like our addiction to things needing to be new, or needing to fit tradition is so strong. It requires, in my opinion, a Herculean effort on a leader or speaker's part to use these things intelligently, and intentionally, because of how much we want things to be new or to follow tradition. Um, yeah, so it's like, and the amount of effort necessary to break through that barrier with people is, in my opinion, is huge. It takes so much effort to, again, like, not repeat the same word twice. You can consistently activate the part of someone's brain that is attracted to novelty. It's, to me, it's fascinating.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, I was able to recognize the appeal to tradition fallacy very young. As soon as I understood that something was a tradition, I I was always my mom hated that I was like always the devil's advocate for everything, and I always did the opposite of like whatever tradition was supposed to be a thing, just to challenge like what would happen if you break the tradition, and the answer is always nothing. Nothing happens. It's just doing it because, and that's not a good reason to do anything.
Right.
Although it's fun, like birthdays are fun. We just do that for fun. Christmas is appealed to tradition. It's fun. So, like aside from that, I typically reject tradition. Um,
Yeah.
what's important about new things that appeal to novelty is not always good. Al and I today we were already talking about the new Lion King, how we're pissed off by like the new Disney. Just because something is new doesn't make it good. But also, just because it's old doesn't make it good either, because the old sequel to the Lion King is also not very good. And so, but what's important about new things is that it gives you the ability to see if something can be changed for the better. If no change happens, no progress happens. So, yeah, I'm always in favor of new things happening, because that's basically the scientific method. If you need to try new things to see what works. If you don't do that, that does not work.